You are listening to SnyderJack. Readings from newspaper publications related to the sale of the Skins and the building of their stadium. This is SnyderJack on Studio Runners Radio. A River for the East film production.
As the success of the Redskins grew, the fan base grew, and getting tickets to a Redskins game became very hard, with RFK holding a record number of consecutive sellouts. Jack Kent Cooke had been rumbling about a new stadium as early as August of 1987, publicly stating the area deserves a far better facility than it already has in RFK. At the time, RFK had the third fewest seats in the NFL. Although the Redskins sold out every game and hauled in more than $1.2 million at the gate each time, about $200,000 more than the league average at the time, Cooke complained about losing money. New stadium talks ramped up even deeper when Washington Redskins owner Jack Kent Cooke announced in August of 1988, following the Super Bowl win by Doug Williams, he would finance construction of a 78,000-seat stadium for the Super Bowl champions to be completed by the 1991 season. My family and I, my sons Ralph and John, hereby undertake to build and pay for the entire cost of a new football stadium for the Redskins, said Cooke, whose announcement was greeted with loud cheers and thunderous applause. It'll hold 78,000 fans, it will be an open-air stadium. It will have natural grass. Cooke last August threatened to move the team after its lease at RFK Stadium expired in 1990 if the city failed to pay for construction of a 75,000-seat domed stadium. Cooke said he would not seek public funds and will search for a jurisdiction, preferably the District of Columbia, to donate land for the new structure. He said the land would ultimately be returned to whichever jurisdiction makes the donation. So I say, let's get on with it. Let's hear from the District of Columbia and any other authority which is prepared to lease the land so that we can begin the building of the stadium and provide parking vital to competent operation of the stadium, Cooke said. I must say now, that I prefer to keep the Redskins in the District of Columbia, while we draw fans from the entire metropolitan area. We are historically the Washington Redskins. Washington is the nation's capital, if not the capital of the world, and I believe all of us should think long and hard before permitting the team to abandon the city. Washington Mayor Marion Barry, who was in Los Angeles at the time, declined to comment until speaking with Cooke, said John White, a spokesman for the mayor. He told me that he didn't want to make any comment until he talks with Jack in person, White said. He hopes to do that early next week. Cooke said he wants the stadium to be completed in time for the 1991 season and built within walking distance of a Washington subway station. Cooke made several attempts over years to get DC to placed for the new Redskins stadium, communicating with Marion Barry and Sharon Pratt Kelly to no avail, and on December 10, 1993, the Washington Redskins owner told the Kelly administration that he has no intention of resuming talks with the district to build a new football complex in the city. Senior aides to Cooke said in separate letters to George W. Brown, the Assistant City Administrator for Economic Development, that he is abandoning a non-binding agreement he signed with the district in February of 1993 to build a new sports complex next to Robert F. Kennedy Memorial Stadium in Northeast Washington. We regret that the agreement so enthusiastically penned last winter will not, for many reasons, be consummated, wrote Cooke's project manager, Walter E. Lynch. Despite his almost unprecedented offer to build the stadium with his own money, he has seen year after year pass away without a shovel going into the ground. Since Cooke announced on Tuesday that he had chosen a site near Laurel Racecourse in suburban Maryland as the future home of the Redskins, district officials have made several attempts to persuade him to keep the team in the city. Mayor Sharon Pratt Kelly, however, has not made any attempts to communicate with Cooke. She returned neither of the telephone calls he placed to her Tuesday, Cooke said. Cooke's attorney, Stuart A. Haney, sent a letter to Brown late yesterday, saying, I wish to reaffirm that there is no useful purpose to be served by our continuing to discuss the placing of the stadium in the District of Columbia. Alas, it is not to be, he wrote. Cooke's declarations came as Maryland Gov. William Donald Schaefer, who has strongly opposed the Laurel proposal, said that if the 81-year-old team owner wants to move the Redskins to the state, he should go to Baltimore. Schaefer has said that the move to Laurel would dampen Baltimore's chances of getting a professional football team. The governor said at a State House news conference that he spoke with Kelly by telephone yesterday and was assured that stadium negotiations between the district and Cooke were continuing. Only if those negotiations end, Schaefer said, would he entertain suggestions that the Redskins move to Maryland. If Sharon Pratt Kelly says there's no opportunity in the district, I would then try to persuade Mr. Cooke to come to Baltimore, Schaefer said. A source close to the Laurel talks said Cooke is unwilling to move the Redskins to Baltimore. He wants to be in Laurel to take advantage of both the Washington and Baltimore markets. The stadium would be located about halfway between the two cities. District officials have promised Cooke that they would swiftly resolve all outstanding issues from their past negotiations so that both sides could sign a lease within the next 30 days. Yesterday, Brown met with federal officials to determine how much funding designated for a highway project near RFK could be used to improve roads and access around a new stadium. That issue has been one of the stumbling blocks in lease negotiations between Cooke and the district. Federal highway officials said a decision on the funding would be made next week. On another sticking point, the Kelly administration is exploring the possibility of having the D.C. Armory Board offer to pay for the potential $8 million cost of removing lead from the site just north of RFK. The board would then seek repayment from the Army Corps of Engineers, which is believed to have placed the lead in the ground during dredging of the nearby Anacostia River. We are moving forward to be ready when he comes back, Brown said yesterday.
You are listening to SnyderJack. Readings from newspaper publications related to the sale of the Skins and the building of their stadium. This is SnyderJack on Studio Runners Radio. A River for the East film production.
Since Cooke signed an agreement with the district in February, he has grown increasingly frustrated by delays in the project, which would be built on federal land and would need the approval of at least a half a dozen federal agencies. Members of Congress, who ultimately would need to approve the proposal, have challenged the use of federal land for private enterprise, as well as the Redskins name, which some Indian groups find offensive. On Thursday, Cooke paid $2.1 million for a 25-acre tract east of the racecourse that was owned by the Resolution Trust Corp. Cooke would use some of that land for stadium parking. On December 1, a day after NFL owners awarded an expansion team to Jacksonville rather than Baltimore, Cooke approached the RDC about buying the parcel, which once had been in the portfolio of United Savings Bank, a failed Virginia savings and loan, according to Ann Freeman, an RDC spokeswoman. The RDC is a federal agency created in the wake of the nation's savings and loan crisis to sell off the assets of failed financial institutions and return the proceeds to the government, which had insured depositors. Cooke is buying the property at RDC's list price, she said. The RDC took control of the property, then valued at $2.7 million, in October 1992. The property at 3500 Fort Meade Road is assessed for tax purposes at $2.3 million, according to state tax records. The parcel is between the racetrack and Route 198, it belonged to a farmer who has since died. A development company, H&M Crofton Station Limited Partnership, purchased the property in 1987 and planned to build an office complex, but the project apparently foundered in the recent real estate recession. Cooke is still negotiating with track owner Joe DeFrancis to buy another piece of land to the northeast of the racecourse. People familiar with the talks said that Cooke would buy at least 20 acres of land from DeFrancis and lease the remainder from the racecourse. Ray Smallwood, the leader of an Anne Arundel coalition of civic associations in the track's vicinity, said Cooke's representatives have contacted him to set up community meetings to discuss the project. He said residents are divided on the stadium and want to see how Cooke proposes to ease the stadium's effect. "We want to see what they are going to do for the community," Smallwood said. Cooke's representatives, who have been blazing trails around Laurel this week trying to build support for the stadium, met yesterday with Anne Arundel County Council Chairman David G. Boshard, D. Crownsville, whose district includes the racecourse area. Del. John S. Morgan, R. Howard Prince George's, who represents the Laurel area, said yesterday that he is organizing a Thursday hearing at Laurel High School. Morgan said he opposes the project and is working with Schaefer's office to have a representative present who can detail potential traffic and environmental problems. Morgan criticized local officials who have endorsed the new stadium project for not first consulting with residents. "I'm filling a vacuum," he said. "There doesn't seem to be any public officials in the Laurel area who are willing to lead the charge against it." Morgan said the traffic problems will be far more extensive than those caused by football games. He noted that some discussions are apparently underway about possibly bringing the Washington Bullets basketball team and the Washington Capitals hockey team to a new arena at the site. "They are going to want to have rock concerts, tractor pulls and the Billy Graham Crusade there so they can milk it for what they can," Morgan said. National Football League Commissioner Paul Tagliabue, a longtime Redskins season ticket holder, said he has no problem with Cooke moving his team to Laurel if that's what it takes to have an improved stadium for the team. "I think it's a positive thing for the Redskins and for their fans," he said. RFK Stadium is far from a state-of-the-art stadium. Thousands of people have to stand up just to see the field. "When I go to stadiums like Joe Robbie near Miami and Arrowhead in Kansas City, MO, and other state-of-the-art facilities, the fans really love those stadiums compared to the RFK Stadium generation," Tagliabue said. "The sidelines are just so much better for the fans, the comfort level is so much better." Kent Cooke then sought to build a new stadium on the grounds adjacent to Laurel Park Racecourse along Whiskey Bottom and Brockbridge Roads. Lack of parking facilities and support prompted a second site selection located near the Capitol Beltway in Prince George's County, Maryland, U.S. 5 miles, 8.0 kilometers, east of Washington, D.C., near the site of the old Capitol Center Arena. Washington Redskins owner Kent Cooke agreed with state and local officials yesterday on the final financing details for a new stadium in Prince George's County, prompting Maryland General Assembly leaders to predict that the arrangement will be ratified in Annapolis next month. The oral agreement calls for the state to spend $58 million on the project in Landover, $15 million less than Gov. Paris and Glendenning pledged in the fall. The difference will be made up with $12.5 million from the county and $2.5 million from Cooke. The development, coupled with yesterday's vote by a General Assembly committee to shave $24 million from the public cost of a proposed football stadium in Baltimore, led to predictions that Maryland, which has had no National Football League team since 1984, soon would have two. "I think this is the turning point," said House of Delegates Speaker Casper R. Taylor Jr. Allegheny. "We now have resolved the funding issue of both stadiums." Cooke has said he wants the 78,600-seat stadium finished by the fall of 1997, meaning the Redskins would play one more season in the district's Robert F. Kennedy Memorial Stadium. Construction would end a nearly 4-year odyssey in which Cooke tried to win approval to build his new stadium in the district, Alexandria, and Laurel. The planned site in Landover is just inside the Capitol Beltway. In reaching the agreement, state officials backed away from earlier demands that Cooke contribute an additional $12.5 million, possibly through a surcharge on tickets. Instead, they agreed that Cooke will pay about $2.5 million for drainage. There will be no tax or surcharge on tickets or parking, Redskins lobbyist Gerard E. Evans said, referring to earlier suggestions by county officials. A few relatively minor items need to be changed in a lengthy memorandum of understanding before representatives of the state, the Redskins, and Prince George's sign the document, he said. Sources affiliated with the Redskins and Glendoning's administration confirmed that the major issues regarding funding have been agreed upon by all parties. Cooke will pay $177 million to build the stadium, plus $7 million for a recreation center, scholarships, and other costs. The state government will pay $58 million for roads and parking lots, plus $5 million for a nearby recreation center. Prince George's County will pay $12.5 million over several years for roads, with its contribution coming from the county's enhanced share of a revamped state highway funding formula. Prince George's County Executive Wayne K. Curry said yesterday, "My concern was always that there be no additional tax burden on Prince George's, and that has been preserved." He said the Redskins Stadium will be one of a string of quality business developments that were attracted to the county during his first year in office. Glendoning, D. ignited a firestorm of public complaints in November when he pledged to spend $200 million to build a Baltimore football stadium to lure the Cleveland Browns and $73 million on the proposed Redskins project in Landover. Taylor and Senate President Thomas V. Mike Miller Jr. D. Prince George's, have spent much of the legislative session trying to quiet the critics, in part by reducing the public costs. Art Modale, owner of the former Cleveland franchise, this week agreed to repay the state $24 million by the year 2010. The General Assembly's legislative analyst said his contribution amounts to about $13.4 million after adjustment for inflation. Modell's franchise will receive all proceeds from parking, advertising, and concessions and will act as the promoter for non-football events, such as concerts, at the stadium to be built adjacent to Oriole Park at Camden Yards. State officials said they also may agree to sell the stadium's name to a corporate sponsor and let Modale have some or all of the profits. Opponents of the two stadium deals conceded that the recent developments have blunted some of the public anger, but they vowed to fight on. Noting that Glendoning earlier had said his agreement with Modale was legally binding, Sen. Christopher Van Hollen Jr. D. Montgomery, said yesterday, "I don't know how you draw a line in the sand and then retreat. I think you lose credibility when you do that." Stadium critics in the General Assembly may try to pare more public costs from the two deals when the Senate Budget and Taxation Committee begins voting on the fiscal 1997 budget next month. Legislative leaders, however, say they have enough votes to move the issues to the House and Senate floors. There, the only way to scuttle the deals would involve amendments to the overall $14 billion state budget. Such amendment efforts rarely succeed. Curry, D., told business leaders, gathered yesterday for the annual State of the County address that he and Glendoning had signed a memorandum of understanding Thursday and forwarded it for Cooke's approval. However, Cooke objected to their proposal to have the Redskins contribute another $12.5 million by adding a $1.25 surcharge to each ticket. At that point, Taylor said, Glendoning and legislative leaders agreed to devote an additional $10 million in state transportation funds to the parking lots and roads outside the stadium. The Redskins deal still faces potential problems from some lawmakers who say Prince George's County isn't contributing enough toward the project, which will generate several $1 million a year in local tax revenue. Sen. Barbara A. Hoffman, D. Baltimore, chairman of the Senate Budget and Taxation Committee, is particularly concerned about the planned revamping of the State Highway User Fund. Currently, half the fund's revenue goes to Baltimore. Under the change, Baltimore's share will drop to about 40%, with the state reimbursing the city $13 million annually from sources yet to be decided. Revamping the fund is crucial to the Redskins Stadium deal, because it provides the extra revenue to Prince George's, from which Curry has agreed to help pay for roads near the complex. The changed highway formula also will benefit Montgomery County, a hotbed of anti-stadium sentiment, and that displeases Hoffman. The goodies are going to the county that's not being helpful, Hoffman said. That's an issue that might erupt in the legislature. Jack Kent Cooke, the crusty entrepreneur whose Washington Redskins won 3 Super Bowls and whose personal life was the stuff of tabloid headlines, died Sunday. He was 84. The NFL owner collapsed at his estate in Northwest Washington and was taken to George Washington University Hospital at 11:34 a.m. and died 35 minutes later. He didn't complain of chest pain, and he suddenly collapsed, said Dr. Robert Chesser, the hospital's chief emergency room physician. When the paramedics arrived on the scene, his heart was not beating. We went through every possible scenario to try to revive him. Cooke, who had a heart attack in 1973, had long been bothered by angina pain and breathing problems. Last November 10, he became ill in his RFK Stadium box during a game. He spent the next 5 days in the hospital, where he was found to have osteoarthritis, a degenerative condition found in the elderly. For Cooke, image was nothing, success was everything. And during his 23 years as majority owner of the Redskins, his success could be measured by his vast financial holdings, his NFL championships, and the parade of celebrities that came calling to his stadium box. "Nobody's going to write a book about me, 50 years from now," Cooke told the Associated Press in 1995, "because nobody's going to find anything worth writing a book about." It was that no-nonsense mindset that helped Cooke become one of the most successful American sports owners. He was a tough negotiator, said D.C. Mayor Marion Barry, who haggled with Cooke for several years over a new stadium. He wouldn't have made all his money if he had been a softie. "I regret that didn't live long enough to see the stadium completed. It was one of his dreams. In fact, he was almost obsessed with it." President Clinton said Cooke's straight-shooting style and love of the fans earned him respect and admiration throughout the sports world. His net worth when he died was estimated at $825 million, earning him the 170th spot on the most recent Forbes magazine's 400 richest Americans list. Cooke's box at RFK was a bipartisan mix of Capitol Hill's finest from presidents to generals like Colin Powell and much of the U.S. Senate. His relentless effort to build a winning football team was matched by his determination to build a new stadium. Despite offering to pay for the building, he endured nearly a decade of rejection by citizens groups and local governments before reaching agreement last year to build a $160 million, 78,600-seat complex near Landover, MD. It is to open this season. Cooke wanted the stadium finished in time for the 1997 NFL season. For that to happen, a Washington Beltway interchange was built on the tightest time schedule. Cooke even coined a postmark for the venue _Raljan_ after his 2 sons, John Kent Cooke and the late Ralph Kent Cooke. Cooke also bucked 2 stadium trends. He refused to charge personal seat licensing fees for season tickets, a practice that essentially forces fans to pay twice for seats. He also resisted the temptation to move his team from the Washington area. "These things can be done if you put your will to it," Cooke said. "This was proved when I built the Forum, which they said would take 78 weeks, it took us 52 weeks. But Cooke's business prowess was often overshadowed by a personal life that smacked of scandal. He was married 5 times, and his first divorce, from the former Jeannie Carnegie, made the Guinness Book of World Records for the largest settlement at that time, $49 million in 1979. The presiding judge was Joseph Wapner of People's Court fame. Bride No. 2. Las Vegas socialite Jean Maxwell Williams, lasted just 10 months. Then came Suzanne Martin, who claimed their 1987 marriage was contingent upon her aborting a fetus conceived by Cooke. After the wedding, she decided to have the baby and the marriage was dissolved after 73 days. Cooke then was married twice to the former Marlena Ramalho Chalmers, who has served 3.5 months in federal prison for conspiring to import cocaine into the country. The first union, which lasted 3.5 years, was declared void because her divorce from a previous husband was invalid. They were married again in 1995, and just last week, attorneys for the Justice Department were in court arguing for Mrs. Cooke's deportation because of her drug conviction. Cooke had far more success with the Redskins. Their rise began in 1981 with the hiring of Joe Gibbs. He and general manager Bobby Beathard built a team that played in 4 Super Bowls and won 3 in 1982, 1987, 1991. Mr. Cooke has never told me, "We can't pay to get that player," Gibbs once said. A lot of other owners don't operate that way. We've never had money as an issue here. Cooke's meddle-free philosophy remained in place with current coach Norv Turner and general manager Charlie Casserly. Both recently received long contract extensions despite a 4-year absence from the playoffs. "That's the way the Redskins have operated forever," Turner said. "And I think it's to our benefit. I almost invariably agree with them," Cooke said of his coaches and executives, "because they know these things better than I do." Ind of tree I'd like to be. Cooke is survived by his wife Marlena, daughter Jacqueline, and his son, John Kent Cooke Sr., who is the Redskins executive vice president and who is expected to assume control of the team. Cooke's other son, Ralph Kent Cooke, died in 1995. With a net worth of more than $900 million, according to Forbes magazine, the 75-year-old head of the Washington Redskins is not the wealthiest owner in the National Football League. The Lions' William Clayford also is worth more than $900 million. The 49ers DeBartolo family and the Seahawks Nordstrom family each are worth $1.2 billion. Cooke sold the forum which he built the Los Angeles Lakers, the Los Angeles Kings plus a 13,000-acre ranch in the Sierra Nevadas to Jerry Buss for $67.5 million. He also left behind his oldest son, Ralph Cooke, who had sided with his mother, and moved east, where he now lives on a 641-acre estate in Middleburg, VA. Second son John Kent Cooke runs the Redskins' day-to-day operation and is listed by Cooke as his only son. Ralph Cooke's former wife, Carrie, is now Mrs. Pete Rozelle, which helps explain why Jack Kent Cooke tried to overthrow the NFL commissioner in 1984. John Kent Cooke was team president in the 1980s and 90s, when the Skins won 3 Super Bowls. It was widely viewed by NFL owners and Washingtonians alike that John Kent Cooke should continue was owner and president of the Washington Redskins. Though it was a lot of tape to deal with in hindsight, Cooke should have remained the owner. By the time he died, Cooke had amassed a $1.3 billion fortune composed primarily of sports teams, media companies, and real estate including the Chrysler Building, a New York landmark. Unfortunately, he also left behind an estate plan that led to utter chaos, disputes among his family and friends, and a $64 million professional services bill. A last will and testament is typically the foundation of the average estate plan. In Cooke's case, his will had been amended 8 times prior to his death and named not 1, not 2, but 7 co-executors. An executor is the individual responsible for overseeing the probate process following the death of the person who wrote the will. Naming 7 people to a position traditionally filled by a single person is quite uncommon, and for good reason. Not surprisingly, Cooke's 7 executors had frequent disagreements which caused unnecessary delays and eventually cost the estate $17 million in executor fees. Family members and longtime friends and colleagues were also pitted against each other. Cooke's unusual multi-executor team was not the only problem with his estate. In addition, his estate lacked the liquidity to fulfill gifts made in the will, and he also appeared to have conflicting desires with regard to the disposition of his estate assets. Cooke indicated that he wanted the Redskins to remain in the family while at the same time leaving it to a charitable foundation in an attempt to reduce estate taxes. The problem was that Cooke did not have enough assets to fulfill both of those requests when his estate entered the probate process. It appears that he might have been counting on other assets to cover any tax liability the estate incurred, thereby leaving the Redskins to be passed down to his son as Cooke had promised. What he likely didn't realize is that federal gift and estate taxes must be paid first, before any testamentary gifts can be fulfilled. If insufficient liquid assets exist to pay the estate's tax bill, estate assets must be sold to raise the necessary funds. In Cooke's case, it seems that he overvalued assets such as the Chrysler Building. This put the Redskins, and his promise to his son, at risk. In the end, Cooke's will required 7 years to go through probate, cost the estate close to $100 million in fees, and caused immeasurable grief and heartache to everyone involved. Had Cooke taken the time to consult with, and listen to, an experienced estate planning attorney, the outcome would undoubtedly have been different. To begin with, he should have created a trust in addition to his will so that the specifics of his estate plan would remain private. Unlike a will, a trust does not go through the probate process, which keeps the will's terms out of the public eye. Also, an estate planning attorney likely would have strongly advised against naming 7 executors, or trustees had he created a trust. Naming 7 executors or trustees all but guarantees a lengthy probate process as well as dissension throughout the process, both of which will ultimately cost the estate money. Finally, an experienced estate planning attorney would have insisted that the plan contemplated various assets' values at the time of death. Doing so would have ensured that his estate had the liquidity necessary to pay any estate taxes due as well as the overall value to fulfill gifts made in his will. The identities of the bidders have been widely reported that the list included Baltimore Orioles majority owner Peter Angelos and businessmen Howard Milstein of New York, Daniel M. Snyder of Bethesda, MD. David Bonderman of Fort Worth, Texas, Ted Lerner of Washington, and Tony and Ben Scotti of Los Angeles. Samuel Grossman, Arizona real estate tycoon. Wall Street investor Ted Forstmann, until Tuesday one of Michael Ovitz's partners to bring football back to Los Angeles, is now reportedly one of 10 bidders trying to purchase the Washington Redskins. Although Ovitz has yet to define the financial contributions of his 10-man ownership team, it has been believed from the outset that Forstmann, an acknowledged billionaire, would be one of the major players in financing a proposed $350 million stadium for Carson. On January 11, Kent Cooke Board of Trustees approved the sale of the Redskins to the Howard Milstein Group, which included Daniel Snyder but not as the primary owner. With a bid of approximately $800 million a North American professional sports record brothers Howard and Edward Milstein along with Daniel Snyder were announced today as the winners of an incredible bidding war for one of the nation's blue-chip franchises. The price breaks the $530 million Alfred Lerner spent last year for the expansion Cleveland Browns, a team for which Howard Milstein also put in a bid. Media mogul Rupert Murdoch has a world record offer of $1 billion pending for the English soccer club Manchester United. The sale is subject to NFL approval and other conditions and is expected to close within the next 60 days, said a statement released by the trustees of the estate of the late Kent Cooke. The sale must be approved by 3/4 of NFL owners, who are expected to take up the matter during Super Bowl week at the end of the month. Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, which has been handling the negotiations, has kept the league apprised during the process to help ensure that the winning candidate would meet NFL requirements. The deal stands to end 25 years of Cooke family control of one of the steadiest franchises in the NFL. Jack Kent Cooke became majority owner in 1974 and assumed day-to-day operations from Edward Bennett Williams in 1980. Williams had run the club since the death of team founder George Preston Marshall in 1969. Final details of the sale were hammered out at a meeting Sunday between members of the Milstein-Snyder Group and the trustees, according to sources involved in the sale. The final sticking point centered on what figure to release when the formal announcement was made today. The trustees' statement listed the price as approximately $800 million. It depends on how you count the money, one source told the Associated Press. The price is $800 million gross. The net is $750 million. The group will pay $800 million, but will essentially get $50 million back right away from money in a Redskins bank account and other assets. The Milstein brothers, who come from a successful banking family, own 45% of the NHL's New York Islanders, but will all but certainly have to sell that interest to comply with the NFL's cross-ownership rules. Howard Milstein, 47, is a noted New York real estate executive who bid $450 million for the Browns. Snyder, 34, is chief executive of Snyder Communications in Bethesda, MD. A marketing firm that employs 8,000 people in 80 locations in 12 countries. It is particularly big in pharmaceutical and long-distance telephone marketing. That the Redskins were to be put up for sale at all was the big surprise when the will was read after Cooke died in April 1997 at the age of 84. Instead of leaving the team to his son, John Kent Cooke, the elder Cooke instructed that the 7 trustees of his estate sell the team and stadium and that the proceeds be used to establish a charitable foundation for children. John Kent Cooke was determined to keep the team in the family, but struggled to keep pace in the bidding process because he lacked the personal wealth of the billionaires and megamillionaires who were competing against him. "This is a sad day for me and my family and our Redskins family," Cooke said in a statement. "I had the desire and the will _ even the ingenuity _ but not enough money to keep the Redskins in my family. In the end, my family could not pay the price of our success, and others could in these affluent times." Unlike the very public sale of the Browns, the Redskins were sold behind a veil of secrecy. Prospective bidders were required to sign a confidentiality agreement. Howard Milstein, the New York real estate developer who was attempting to buy the Washington Redskins with a debt-laden $800 million bid, withdrew his offer yesterday, paving the way for current owner John Kent Cooke to get a second chance to retain the team. Facing almost certain rejection at a special National Football League owners meeting in Atlanta after the league's powerful finance committee split 3-3-1 on his offer, Milstein withdrew his bid and promised not to sue the league. The $800 million would have been the highest price for an American sports franchise, surpassing the $530 million that Alfred Lerner paid for the NFL's expansion Cleveland Browns. In return for Milstein's withdrawal, the owners voted 28-2-1 to repay Milstein the non-refundable $30 million he paid the trustees of the Jack Kent Cooke estate when his bid was accepted on Jan. 11. Only the St. Louis Rams and the Redskins, who were ordered by the trustees to vote to approve the deal, voted no. As he usually does on most matters, Oakland Raiders owner Al Davis abstained. The owners will attempt to get the trustees to return the deposit, but will repay Milstein, who is also part owner of the National Hockey League's New York Islanders, if they don't. Our commitment is that the $30 million is our problem and not theirs. If there is a forfeiture, we will pay the money, Commissioner Paul Tagliabue said. There was no comment from the trustees. One of them, Mark Pollock, a Baltimore attorney, did not return phone calls to his office. The trustees now have the option of reopening the bidding process or accepting the losing bid of $680 million made by Cooke, who has been running the team since his father died 2 years ago. I have notified the executors of my father's estate that my offer is still on the table, Cooke said in a statement. The trustees seem more likely to reopen the process, because they had disputes with Cooke over his running of the team after they accepted Milstein's bid. Tagliabue finally stepped in at the start of the free agent signing period on February 12 and ruled that Cooke was in charge. In the confusion, the Redskins lost free agent quarterback Trent Green to the Rams and then traded 3 high draft picks to the Minnesota Vikings for quarterback Brad Johnson. Cooke will continue to run the team until the matter is resolved. He said, "There will be business as usual at Redskins Park, with General Manager Charlie Casserly and Coach Norv Turner continuing in their jobs." Milstein had reportedly planned to fire both. Howard Milstein charged yesterday in a federal lawsuit that his group's $800 million bid to acquire the Washington Redskins was sabotaged by Kent Cooke, the team's president, and Charlie Casserly, the general manager. In their lawsuit against Cooke and Casserly, Milstein and his brother, Edward, contended that the 2 Redskins officials orchestrated a clandestine plan to keep the team in their hands. The Milsteins also accused certain National Football League officials of complicity in the failure of their Washington sports ventures firm to buy the Redskins. The lawsuit stated, the Milsteins did not know that the defendant Kent Cooke had already fixed the ultimate outcome with certain NFL officials so that the bidding process was a charade and there was no chance that plaintiff W.S.V. would ultimately succeed, no matter how high or attractive their bid. In a statement released by the team, Cooke said, "If I must, I will gladly defend myself against these petulant charges, which have no merit whatsoever." A league spokesman declined to comment on the lawsuit, which was filed in federal district court in Washington. The Milsteins have extensive real estate holdings in the New York area, and a group they headed bought the Islanders' professional hockey team last year. The lesser of 2 weasels. As we lament the many plagues of the Dan Snyder era, consider this: Howard Milstein could own the Redskins. Last week, the law firm of Boyce, Schiller and Flexner, the workplace of David Boyce, took a break from litigation on behalf of what sources describe as a candidate for the most powerful office in the world to try to resuscitate another of the superstar attorney's cases. This one in representation of Milstein. The firm filed a motion with a federal appeals court in Virginia hoping to overturn a host of lower court verdicts that went against Milstein, all related to his client's attempted acquisition of the Skins. Boyce, rather like the team, finds himself on something of a losing streak. Milstein had sued Kent Cooke and other officials with the estate of former Redskins owner Kent Cooke, including former Skins general manager Charlie Casserly, for their conduct during the thwarted sale of the team to Washington Sports Ventures, a group Milstein headed. The scion of one of New York's wealthiest families contended that, but for the actions of Kent Cooke, the scion of one of Middleburg's wealthiest families, he would now be spending his fall Sundays in the owner's box at Milstein Manor, or whatever he would have renamed the Redskins' home stadium. As we now know, Milstein never got that chance. To recap, the Redskins were put up for bid by the estate of Kent Cooke not long after his death, in April 1997. Milstein won that auction in January 1999, against bidders including Kent Cooke, by offering $800 million. But even though Milstein's bid, still a record sum for a sports franchise, was accepted by the estate, the NFL owners eventually poo-pooed it. Those same owners allowed the platform showed Snyder, originally a junior partner in the Milstein Group, to match the big bid and take over the Redskins. Among the reported reasons for Milstein's rejection was that many in the NFL brotherhood thought he would be too litigious. Milstein denounced that charge, even after his bid to get the Skins was so brutally rejected, and some bought into his denunciation. On Thursday, April 29, 1999, the Washington Times reported, Howard Milstein's hiring of top litigator David Boies is not expected to result in a lawsuit against the estate of Jack Kent Cooke. The paper cited sources close to the sale and legal experts. Oh, well. 3 weeks after the Times report, Milstein filed against John Kent Cooke et al. In the suit, Milstein contended that Cooke, hoping to keep the team in the family, had instigated the whooping Milstein took from NFL owners, and that Cooke's attempts to gain control of the team even after bidding less than Milstein were in violation of his duty as a trustee of the estate to get the most money for his dad's holdings. Jack Kent Cooke's will called for all proceeds from the sale of his stuff to go toward a charitable trust. Mr. Cooke acted against approval of the sale of the team to the Milstein Group and instructed Mr. Casserly to do the same, says Jonathan Schiller, A.D.C. based partner of Boies. He told other owners he still wanted the team. When Mr. Casserly went to a meeting of the owners, he expressed Mr. Cooke's disappointment and was critical of the Milstein Group. As the agent of Mr. Cooke and the team, it was his obligation to make sure he was supportive of the approval. He didn't do that. Despite the appeal, Milstein's suit now seems about as dead as Gore's transition plans. In late October, a judge in U.S. District Court threw out the last of 5 counts of Milstein's complaint against Cooke and his partners. The federal court even said that the estate didn't have to refund the $20 million Milstein had put down as a deposit to buy the team. Because of national media portrayals, Boies came into the Gore litigation with an aura of invincibility. Much of that rep was deserved. He did bring Microsoft to its knees, for Christ's sakes. But the Redskins litigation proves that Boies is beatable. Just ask David Donovan, the D.C. lawyer who, as Cooke's attorney, played David to Boies' Goliath. If you lose 5 out of 5 counts, that's a loss, says Donovan. David Boies has got to count this as a loss. But you could say this was a good lawyer, bad case situation. Milstein has another odd connection to the 2000 presidential campaign. His first cousin Connie Milstein is the woman who allegedly gave cigarettes to about a dozen homeless Milwaukeeans in exchange for Gore votes. Milstein's resume shows that, unlike Boies, he hasn't won much. In 1994, Milstein was involved in a failed effort to found the United Baseball League, a confederation proponents hoped would one day rival Major League Baseball. In 1995, he was part of the group behind Major League Football, a proposed rival to the National Football League that never kicked off. He makes enemies easily. In 1998, while Milstein was trying to buy into the Toronto Blue Jays, his relationship with reporters north of the border went south almost from the outset. One Toronto columnist wrote that if Milstein were approved as the Jays owner, he'd bring a bulldozer Durham-etic to the national pastime. The team looked elsewhere for financing. An attempt by Milstein to bring an NFL franchise to Canada also died, as did a plan to build what was billed as a $140 million shopping center and casino operation near Niagara Falls. Milstein's Cleveland sports ventures, though a finalist in the bidding for the Cleveland Browns expansion franchise, lost out to a group led by Al Lerner. Then Milstein tried to buy the NBA's New Jersey Nets but was turned down. Milstein finally got himself a sports franchise in 1998, when his New York sports ventures paid $195 million for the New York Islanders, a record sum for an NHL team. Milstein's stewardship of the once storied franchise was an unmitigated disaster, with fans and players abandoning the squad after accusations that he had bought the team only in order to develop the land around its decrepit home arena, Nassau Coliseum. Milstein also shipped off all the Islanders' stars, reduced the payroll to a league-low $15 million, and, at one point, threatened to move the team to Cleveland. What was left of the Islanders following cheered when he sold the team last year to Charles Wang at a loss. And, earlier this year, Milstein found himself on the business end of a lawsuit filed by members of his own family. Among the allegations, he had used family money to finance his sporting ventures without getting proper permission. But not everybody thinks of Milstein as a bad actor. Mr. Milstein has been wonderful to us, says Veronica Park, president of Martha's Table. Last year, long after he'd been rejected as Skins owner, Milstein donated $25,000 to the D.C. Soup Kitchen. The money helped finance an expansion of the preschool area inside the organization's 14th Street compound. Milstein asked for nothing in return for the donation, which got no publicity either here or in New York. Dave McKenna. Howard Milstein withdrew his group's debt-laden, $803 million offer to buy the Washington Redskins from the estate of Jack Kent Cooke today, after 3 months of occasionally contentious wrangling with the National Football League. When Milstein made a final plea to the league's full ownership in the early afternoon, the New York real estate magnate knew that he faced rejection if he did not withdraw. The league's finance committee had already deadlocked on his group's financing package, 3-3, with one abstention, and it was unlikely that the 31 owners would approve the bid if the finance committee did not. Throughout the 4.5-hour finance committee meeting, Milstein stayed in his hotel room, occasionally wrestling with his advisors over whether to withdraw, said one person who discussed the situation with him. Several times, John Zuccotti, a legal counselor to the Milstein family, was summoned to the owner's meeting room to answer questions. In a calm speech, Milstein reiterated why his bid should have been approved, but conceded the owner's right to choose their partners and agreed that if they felt he should withdraw he would. When he left, the owners voted by 28-2, with an abstention, to accept his withdrawal. Milstein rushed into a waiting limousine, but left behind a group statement that said, "In the end, we complied with all the league's stated requirements and agreed to all of the league's additional conditions." He added, "The record will show that we conducted ourselves in an honest, forthright, and courteous manner, in short, as gentlemen." The NFL has never directly rejected a prospective owner, but has persuaded candidates to drop out, if there were not enough votes for approval. Wellington Mara, the co-owner of the Giants, said, "I guess there was a sense of relief, not that he withdrew but that the issue is settled." Tom Benson, the New Orleans Saints owner and a staunch finance committee opponent of Milstein's, said, "It worked out just great." But the Redskins still face ownership uncertainty. The Cooke estate will restart the sale process, and John Kent Cooke, the late owner's son, will continue to oversee the team. Cooke, who bid $680 million for his father's sports legacy, could bid again, as could Daniel Snyder, a Bethesda, MD businessman, who was a partner in Milstein's group. Whether any prospective buyer will pay as much as $803 million is uncertain, especially after the difficult process that led to Milstein's departure. The Milstein bid, the largest ever made for a United States sports franchise, was in trouble Tuesday night when Paul Tagliabue, the NFL commissioner, met with several finance committee members and Zuccotti. Tagliabue said the bid lacked the votes for approval and an exit strategy was formed for Milstein, his brother Edward and Snyder. The key element of the plan is for the league to recover a $30 million non-refundable deposit that the Milstein Group paid the Cooke estate in exchange for a vow by Milstein not to sue the league. Tagliabue and Robert Kraft, the chairman of the finance committee and owner of the New England Patriots, described the non-refundable deposit as an offensive term. "A number of owners felt negatively about that," Kraft said. "We want to pick our own partners." Tagliabue said, "It was a penalty that wasn't justified. The league disliked having the estate sell the team, but it had no choice. It was rebuffed by the estate's trustees when it asked to be presented with 2 prospective owners for approval. The league wanted to be able to consider John Kent Cooke's bid, and perhaps find a way to keep the team in the Cooke family. but the owners were presented only with the Milstein bid. Their queasiness about embracing it centered on the steep level of bank borrowing it would have required. They never accepted Milstein's intention, at first, to borrow as much as $400 million against his real estate assets, which were deemed not liquid, and not easy to sell if the loan fell into default. A financing change made last week, in which Paul Milstein, Howard's father, agreed to lend him $125 million, and not sue his son if the loan was not paid, was deemed insufficient by the owners. Paul Milstein also agreed to lend Edward $25 million. Tagliabue said the owners resistant to the Milstein Group balked at regarding the $150 million from the elder Milstein as equity, and were worried that only $50 million in cash was in the deal, all from Snyder. I think of J.F.K., who was very well-to-do but always had little cash in his pocket, said Kraft, who was in favor of the Milstein financing package despite the large amount of debt. This group has tremendous net worth, but most of it is illiquid or in partnerships. Other factors that entered into considering Milstein included his litigious reputation, and his troubled 15-month tenure, with Edward, as the half-owner of the Islanders. The team's legal wars with Nassau County and S.M.G. The Nassau Coliseum landlord, its slashed payroll and miserable record were not viewed with admiration. The issue was pursued fairly or unfairly, said Jerry Jones, the Dallas Cowboys owner, who supported Milstein. It was viewed as a past sports involvement and negative issues were brought up. Milstein was quiet yesterday about selling the 45% stake in the Islanders that he and his brother own. If he had been approved to own the Redskins, he would have been required to sell the team. Now, he is likely to sell, but unlikely to break even. The Milsteins and Stephen Gluckstern paid $195 million last year for the Islanders and the hockey team's cable television contract. Atlanta, May 2. National Football League owners voted unanimously today to approve the sale of the Washington Redskins and Kent Cooke Stadium to a group headed by Daniel M. Snyder for $800 million, a record price for a U.S. sports franchise. By a margin of 31-0, the league ended an arduous and often bitter 9-month sale process conducted by trustees for the estate of late team owner Kent Cooke. It also allowed Snyder, 34, a lifelong Washingtonian, to complete what he described as an unbelievable journey that fulfilled a lifelong dream. Buying the Redskins is the most wonderful thing that's ever happened to me, said Snyder, a Bethesda marketing executive. I'm a fan, a huge fan. It's that simple. I'm not focused on the money, I'm focused on the opportunity and the dream. Hundreds of fans have written to me with their support and suggestions. Your most pressing issue is no different than mine. You want to win, we want to win, and we're going to deliver that. The Redskins vote, ending 25 years of majority ownership of the team by the Cooke family, was officially cast by General Manager Charlie Casserly, who was invited into the meeting at an Atlanta hotel at 10:12 a.m. 2 minutes later, Snyder, minority partner Fred Drassner and Cinder's attorney Tom McCormick were ushered into the meeting room and informed the sale had been approved. Snyder will invest about $120 million in cash, with family members adding another $90 million and Drassner and minority partner Mort Zuckerman, the Boston real estate and publishing magnate, putting up $90 million. Zuckerman and Drassner have known Snyder since the mid-1980s and were original investors in Snyder Communications, his Bethesda-based business with revenue approaching $1 billion a year. Snyder, who briefly addressed the owners this morning, was allowed to remain in the meeting. He sat next to Casserly for the rest of the morning session and was present for the afternoon business meeting. Snyder will not have a vote as an owner until the sale is finalized by the trustees of the Cooke Foundation, most likely by the end of June. He also technically is prohibited from conducting business as the team owner until the closing, but sources indicated that he will begin studying the team's business operations and making plans to implement possible changes before the final settlement. At a midday news conference, NFL Commissioner Paul Tagliabue introduced Snyder as the perfect person to pick up the Cooke legacy and run with it. Dan Snyder has proved his mettle in the business world at a young age, and he's a passionate NFL fan and Redskins fan. Snyder, who made his $500 million fortune in marketing and advertising, said he will strongly consider selling naming rights to the stadium. He said he will not change the name of the team, which is offensive to Native Americans and other people. He also pledged his ownership would provide a new energy at Redskins Park and in the stadium. With his wife, Tanya, standing in back of the interview room, Snyder thanked her, the NFL owners, Redskins employees, and fans, and the Cooke family. It's because of their Cooke stewardship that the Redskins have become such a storied franchise, he said. We really appreciate everything they've done and we hope to continue with that. Among Snyder's duties will be to name a new team president, though he said no decisions have been made. Sources close to Snyder said he will seek a person with both a business and football background to oversee the franchise on a day-to-day basis. Former Miami Dolphins coach Don Shula and former Carolina Panthers president Mike McCormick, both in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, are among a number of names on a preliminary list of potential candidates, but have not been contacted. Snyder takes over a team that finished 6-10 and missed the playoffs last year for the 6th consecutive season. Still, he said he had high hopes. The Redskins are in a rebuilding phase, said Snyder, the youngest owner in the league. We just had what everyone agrees was a great draft. In my dreams, we'd win the Super Bowl next year. In truth, I hope and I'd like that to happen. However, in the coming year, you'll find there's a new energy at Redskins Park. You'll feel that energy in the stadium. That's my pledge. That's my obligation. Snyder spoke to the owners briefly this morning and answered several questions from the floor, including a query about his relationship with New York financier Howard Milstein, his former partner. Milstein's attempt to purchase the team ended on April 7 when he withdrew his $800 million bid in the face of opposition from league owners, some of whom were concerned about the financial structure of his deal and whether he would be a cooperative partner. Snyder, Milstein's minority partner, told the owners he had no financial relationship with Milstein, but said during his news conference he still considered him a friend and wished him well. On May 17, Milstein filed a lawsuit in federal court alleging that Redskins president Kent Cooke and Casserly conspired to derail his bid to buy the team. He is seeking unspecified damages. Cooke declined to comment on the sale to Snyder, but issued a statement, "This has been a long goodbye. As disappointing as it has also been very gratifying to hear how much my family has meant to the National Football League and Redskins fans. Dad would have been as overwhelmed as I am. Thank you to all. Hail to the great Redskins fans." Under terms of his father's will, John Cooke, who twice bid unsuccessfully for the team, will inherit about 10% of the sale price, minus expenses, and might get as much as $60 million from the transaction. Proceeds from the sale will be used to set up a charitable trust to provide scholarships for postgraduate students. Snyder will contact Cooke shortly about making an orderly ownership transition and was planning to visit Redskins Park later this week to address team employees and players. Snyder has said Casserly and coach Norv Turner, both under contract through 2001, will keep their jobs for the 1999 season. He met with both men after arriving here Monday night. He also recently wrote to team employees indicating they all will keep their jobs and thanked them today for enduring an anxious and unsettling time. "I think Dan is committed to winning and he's committed to doing things the right way," Casserly said. "This is what he expressed to me. His enthusiasm for the Redskins and his desire to succeed will be contagious when people meet him. He has a very good knowledge of the Redskins." Richard Cass, an attorney for the trustees, was at the hotel this morning when the vote was taken. "We're delighted the NFL has approved Dan Snyder as the controlling owner and we look forward to completing the sale as soon as possible," he said. NFL owners seemed mostly relieved to get the Redskins sale behind them, and publicly welcomed their new partner. New Orleans Saints owner Tom Benson, a leading opponent of Milstein's financing plan because he thought it contained too much debt, indicated he had no reservations about Snyder. "Financially he's got it structured very strong," said Benson, a member of the 8-member finance committee that unanimously recommended the sale last Wednesday. "He's got good partners and they put up a lot of upfront money. If there's a problem with revenues, they've said they're prepared to step in if they have to. He impresses me as a team player. He knows our rules and regulations. Once he grasped what we wanted, he went out and got it done. He's going to be a good partner for us." Finance Committee Chairman Robert Kraft, owner of the New England Patriots, described Snyder as passionate about the game. "You don't have to worry that the new steward of the franchise has anything on his mind but winning. A unanimous vote doesn't happen very often in this league. I have a bias for owners who are passionate and will put winning on the field above everything else." In 1989, Snyder and his sister Michelle founded a wallboard advertising, the sale of advertisements placed on boards inside buildings, company with seed money from his father, who took a second mortgage on his property in England, and his sister, who maxed out her credit cards at $35,000. They concentrated on wallboards in doctors' offices, where there was a captive audience, and colleges. They married the advertisement with the distribution of product samples such as soaps and packages of medicine, to differentiate themselves from their competitors. The company was named Snyder Communications LP. The business was a great success and Snyder and his sister grew the business organically and through acquisitions and expanded its activities to all aspects of outsourced marketing, including direct marketing, database marketing, proprietary product sampling, sponsored information display in prime locations, call centers, and field sales. Citation needed. They expanded their geography from colleges and doctors' offices to hospital maternity areas, private daycare centers, and fixed-based operations, FBO, or private aircraft lounges in major airports throughout the country. Citation needed. In 1992, the company expanded into telemarketing with a focus on the yet untapped immigrant market. Snyder Communications revenues rose from $2.7 million in 1991 to $4.1 million in 1992 and $9 million in 1993. Proprietary product sampling was introduced in 1992 through their network of private daycare centers. Citation needed. In an initial public offering for SNC in September 1996, Daniel Snyder became the youngest ever CEO of a New York Stock Exchange listed company at the age of 32. 12 Snyder's top investors, including media mogul Barry Diller, New York investor Dan Lufkin, and Democratic Party icon Robert Strauss, earned significant returns on their initial investment. Mortimer Zuckerman and Fred Drassner, whom Snyder owed $3 million from the failure of his first business venture, were given company stock, which ended up being worth over $500 million. His parents sold their stock in the company for over $60 million. He continued to expand the company aggressively through a string of acquisitions, including Arnold Communications in 1997. By 1998, the company had over 12,000 employees and $1 billion in annual revenues. In April 2000, Snyder Communications was sold to the French advertising and marketing services group Havas in an all-stock transaction valued at in excess of $2 billion, the largest transaction in the history of the advertising/market industry. Citation needed. Snyder's personal share of the proceeds was estimated to be $300. In May 1999, Snyder purchased the Redskins and Kent Cooke Stadium, now FedEx Field, for $800 million following the death of previous owner Kent Cooke. At the time, it was the most expensive transaction in sporting history. 14. The deal was financed largely through borrowed money, including $340 million borrowed from Societe Generale and $155 million debt assumed on the stadium. Citation needed annual loan servicing costs are an estimated $50 million. Citation needed in order to pay down the team's debt. In 2003 he sold 15% of the team to real estate developer Dwight Scharf for $200 million, 15% to Florida financier Robert Rothman for a like amount, and 5% to Frederick W. Smith, the founder of Federal Express, leaving him with a 65% ownership interest. 4. Howard Milstein withdrew his $800 million bid to buy the Washington Redskins on Wednesday when it became apparent his group lacked support from NFL owners. The league's finance committee failed to recommend approval of the sale, voting 3-3 with one abstention after a 4-1/2-hour meeting. Milstein, a New York real estate developer and part owner of the NHL's Islanders, then briefly addressed all the owners to make his case one final time before offering to pull out. Milstein left the room, and the owners voted 28-2-1 to accept the withdrawal. Milstein's withdrawal came with a pledge that he will not sue the league. In return, the league agreed to assume responsibility for a non-refundable $30 million deposit Milstein was required to make when his bid was selected by the trustees of the estate of the late Jack Kent Cooke on Jan. 10. The league expects Milstein's partner, Daniel Snyder, to form another ownership group, leading to yet another round of bidding. For now, team president John Kent Cooke, the son of Jack Kent Cooke, will continue to run the team, retaining coach Norv Turner and general manager Charlie Casserly.